A federal inspector general was driving to document a pattern of complaints. She was dressed like an ordinary civilian, no badge displayed, no federal SUV with tinted windows, no armed escort, just a woman in coral athletic wear behind the wheel of a silver Honda Accord. When she reached the outskirts of Ashford, Texas, she spotted a checkpoint ahead on Highway 77. 4 sheriff's deputies stood in a loose formation across both lanes, and in the center stood Sergeant Jake Maddox in his crisp tan uniform, aviator sunglasses reflecting the late morning sun. He raised his hand with casual authority, signaling her to pull over. She eased the Honda onto the gravel shoulder and shifted into park. In a voice that carried both authority and contempt, Maddox called out, "License and registration. Step out of the vehicle." Emily responded evenly, her window still up. "What's the legal basis for this stop, officer?" Sergeant Maddox walked closer, his boots crunching on gravel, and leaned down to look through her window. The woman before him was a 32-year-old professional whose name was Emily Richardson. His lips curled into a smirk as he straightened up and announced loudly enough for his squad to hear, "Oh, we got ourselves a lawyer here, boys. Thinks she can quote law to us." But Emily had already recognized exactly what this was. Not a legitimate safety checkpoint, but a fishing expedition, a power ritual. She said calmly, "I'm asking for the statutory authority under which you're detaining me." "Ma'am, don't try to teach us how to do our jobs." Maddox glanced at Deputy Hoskins standing to his right, then looked back at Emily with an expression that had intimidated dozens before her. "Sounds like we need to give this one a compliance lesson." Without warning, Maddox yanked her door open and grabbed her arm. "Out. Now. Hands on the hood." Emily's heart rate spiked, but her face remained composed. Anger flickered in her eyes for just a fraction of a second before she controlled it. The supervising officer, Sergeant Jake Maddox, had just made his first federally prosecutable mistake, and her concealed body cam had captured every word, every unauthorized touch, every violation that was about to unfold on the scorching Texas asphalt. Emily's fingers tightened imperceptibly on the steering wheel as Maddox's hand remained on her car door. She could comply and escalate this slowly, or she could push just enough to see how far they'd go. She chose the latter. "Officer, I'm happy to cooperate, but Texas Transportation Code requires reasonable suspicion for a vehicle search. Do you have that?" The temperature of the interaction dropped 20 degrees. Maddox's jaw clenched, and the casual arrogance in his posture transformed into something harder, more dangerous. He straightened up and called over his shoulder, "Hoskins, Chen, Ramirez, over here. We got a smart one, boys." 3 deputies materialized from their positions near the patrol vehicles. Deputy Hoskins was thick-necked and smirking. Officer Chen looked bureaucratic, already mentally filling out paperwork. Officer Ramirez was younger, his eyes uncertain but his stance compliant with the group dynamic. Maddox leaned back down, his voice dropping to a register that was meant to intimidate. "Let me explain something to you, sweetheart. Your rights are whatever I say they are out here. Now you can step out voluntarily, or I can drag you out for obstruction. Your choice." Emily made a show of considering, then nodded slowly. "I'm stepping out under protest and documenting that this stop lacks probable cause." She opened the door carefully, her movements deliberate and non-threatening. As her feet touched the sun-baked asphalt, she felt the heat radiating through her sneakers. "Hands on the hood. Spread your legs." The command was delivered with practiced ease. Maddox had done this countless times. Emily complied, her palms pressing against the Honda's hot metal surface. As she assumed the position, her eyes tracked each officer with peripheral precision. Deputy Hoskins, badge number 2847, positioned himself to her left. Officer Chen, badge 3104, stood back with his tablet already out. Officer Ramirez, badge 2993, took a position to her right but kept glancing at Maddox for cues. They formed a semicircle, part audience, part accomplices. "We're going to conduct a weapons check," Maddox announced, his voice now carrying a theatrical quality meant for his squad's benefit. "For officer safety. You understand, don't you?" Emily's mind was cataloging every detail with clinical precision. No pat-down notification, no female officer requested, no actual articulation of threat. The fitness tracker on her wrist, her FBI-certified body cam, captured the scene from her point of view, 4 armed men surrounding one unarmed woman on an empty highway. The trap had sprung exactly as she'd intended. Now came the hard part, enduring what she knew was coming next. Maddox's hand reached toward her shoulder, and Emily forced herself not to flinch. She needed them comfortable. She needed them to believe they were untouchable. "Let's see what we're dealing with here," Maddox said, his tone shifting into something that made Ramirez look away. "On the ground, push-up position, now." The command cut through the humid air like a whip crack. Emily's breath caught, not from fear, but from the recognition that they'd escalated faster than even her worst-case projections. The asphalt shimmered with heat waves, easily 140 degrees under the merciless Texas sun. "You heard the sergeant," Hoskins added with barely concealed glee. "Down." Emily lowered herself slowly, her palms making contact with the scorching pavement. The heat was immediate and vicious, radiating through her skin like she'd pressed her hands against a stovetop. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep from gasping, settling into a plank position that exposed her to maximum humiliation and vulnerability. Maddox circled her like a predator examining prey. "Arms wider, legs too. Need to make sure you're not concealing anything." His boot tapped the inside of her left ankle, nudging it outward. Then the right. The position became obscene, deliberate. "Need to be thorough with this one," he announced to his audience, and Hoskins barked out a laugh that made Emily's stomach turn. Chen was already recording on his phone, the lens pointed downward at her prone form. Hoskins pulled out his phone too, documentation of their conquest, a trophy video to share later in their group chat. Emily's hands were screaming now, the heat threatening to blister her palms. Sweat beaded on her forehead and dripped onto the pavement, evaporating instantly. But her mind remained ice-cold, clinical, processing everything. Let them think they've won. Let them get comfortable. Officer Ramirez shifted his weight from foot to foot, his discomfort visible in the tight set of his shoulders. He opened his mouth as if to speak, glanced at Maddox's expression of satisfaction, and closed it again. The first crack in the wall, but not enough to break ranks. Not yet. Maddox crouched beside Emily's head, his voice dropping to an intimate register meant only for her. "Still think you know your rights, sweetheart? Because out here I'm the law. You're just another civilian who needs to learn some respect." Emily's fitness tracker, innocent and unassuming on her wrist, captured every word, every angle, every face. The tiny lens recorded Maddox's sneer, Hoskins's phone, Chen's bureaucratic documentation, Ramirez's moral cowardice. "Let them show me exactly who they are when they believe there are no consequences." "How long should we keep her down there, Sarge?" Hoskins asked, his tone suggesting this was entertainment. Maddox pretended to consider, "Until she learns some manners." Emily's hands trembled against the burning asphalt, but not from pain. From rage she was transmuting into evidence, humiliation she was documenting into federal charges, abuse she was recording into justice. After 7 minutes on the scorching pavement, Maddox hauled Emily to her feet by her upper arm, his grip deliberately bruising. "You're under arrest for resisting arrest and obstruction of a peace officer." The absurdity of being arrested for resisting an arrest that hadn't existed yet would have been comical if it weren't so devastatingly common. Emily remained silent as Maddox twisted her arms behind her back, the zip-tie cuffs biting into her wrists. Chen was already at his tablet, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Subject became aggressive during lawful search," he narrated aloud as he typed. "Made threatening movements toward Officer Maddox. Physical force necessary to secure subject." The lie materialized in real time, each keystroke embedding fiction into official record. This was routine for them, the casual manufacture of probable cause, the bureaucratic alchemy that transformed victims into perpetrators. Emily was shoved into the back of Maddox's cruiser, the plastic seat hot enough to burn through her coral pants. Hoskins climbed into the passenger seat and immediately twisted around to leer at her through the cage partition. "You know what happens to difficult women in lockup?" His smile was predatory. "They learn real quick that cooperation makes everything easier, if you know what I mean." The 15-minute drive to the county holding facility was silent except for Hoskins's occasional crude commentary. Emily kept her eyes forward, her jaw tight, her body cam recording every word. Processing was designed for maximum degradation. Emily was photographed from humiliating angles, bent over, arms raised, legs spread, all supposedly for identification purposes. Her belongings were cataloged and confiscated. The fitness tracker went into a property bag, its LEDs still blinking innocuously. The holding cell was a 6x8 concrete box that reeked of vomit, bleach, and human desperation. A steel toilet without a seat occupied one corner. The bench was crusted with substances Emily didn't want to identify. Through the bars, she watched Maddox, Hoskins, Chen, and Ramirez gathered near the booking desk. Fist bumps were exchanged. Maddox said something that made them all laugh. Probably a joke about the difficult blonde they'd just put in her place. A woman in an orange trustee uniform approached the cell, pushing a mop bucket. She glanced around furtively before whispering, "Whatever you did to piss them off, I'm so sorry." Emily looked at her fully for the first time. The woman was perhaps 40, with tired eyes and a left arm that hung at an odd angle. "They broke my arm last year during intake," the woman continued, her voice barely audible. "Said I was combative. Nobody believed me. I'm Maria." Emily's resolve, already diamond hard, crystallized into something transcendent. This wasn't about her federal investigation anymore. This wasn't even about her personal violation. This was about Maria. And every other person who'd stood where Emily stood now, without a body cam, without federal credentials, without any hope that the system would believe them over a police report. "I believe you," Emily said quietly. 2 hours and 13 minutes after her arrest, Emily heard boots approaching with purposeful irritation. Sheriff Dennis Coleman appeared in the corridor, his face set in the expression of a man whose Sunday had been interrupted for something he considered beneath his attention. "Maddox, what the hell requires a Sunday transfer?" Coleman's voice carried the edge of administrative annoyance. "This better be good." Maddox appeared behind him, his earlier swagger now tempered with something that might have been nervousness. "Difficult subject, Sheriff. Thought it best to move her to county before she caused more problems." Coleman approached the cell, barely glancing at Emily as he pulled out his phone to access the booking form. "Name?" Emily stood, her coral outfit now torn at the shoulder, dirt-streaked and spotted with asphalt burns. But her voice was steady, clear, and cut through the stale air like a surgical blade. "Federal Inspector General Emily Richardson, Southwest Region, badge number FIG 2847. She paused, letting each word land with precision. "You need to call your county attorney immediately, Sheriff Coleman, because every action taken by your deputies in the last 2 hours has been recorded and constitutes multiple federal civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. The color didn't just drain from Coleman's face, it evacuated. His phone slipped in his hand, nearly falling. Behind him, Maddox's mouth opened wordlessly. She never identified herself. Maddox finally stammered, his voice cracking on the last syllable. Emily's eyes locked onto him with the focused intensity of a prosecutor addressing a defendant. "I shouldn't have to, Sergeant. Your authority to detain any citizen requires probable cause, which you fabricated. Your search was sexually invasive without legal justification. Your arrest report," she gestured toward Chen, who had gone absolutely rigid, "is a work of complete fiction." She raised her left wrist, displaying the innocuous fitness tracker, FBI-certified body cam, every second, every word, every face. Her voice dropped to something colder than the holding cell concrete. Every violation. The power dynamic didn't shift. It detonated. Coleman's hand went to his forehead. Maddox took an involuntary step backward. Chen's tablet slipped from his fingers and clattered on the floor. Even Hoskins, who'd been lounging near the coffee station, straightened up as though he'd been electrocuted. "You forced a federal inspector general into a push-up position on 140-degree asphalt," Emily continued, her tone clinically precise. "You fabricated charges. You made sexually explicit threats during transport. You photographed me in degrading positions without legal basis." She stepped closer to the bars. "And Sheriff Coleman, You're going to want to secure this facility immediately because FBI agents are already en route. This isn't just about 4 deputies anymore. Maria, still visible in the corridor with her mop bucket, whispered one word that echoed in the suddenly silent holding area. Finally. Thank you for taking the time to read Emily Richardson's story. This narrative explores difficult themes: abuse of power, systemic corruption, and the courage required to expose injustice, because these issues affect real people every day. Stories like this matter because they remind us that accountability is possible, that silence can be broken, and that one person's willingness to endure temporary suffering can create lasting change for countless others.